Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss how Sunak's greatest failure is that he has been unable to move the party from beyond Boris Johnson's shadow. As general election fever is ramping up, the last thing Tory strategists would want is to see reports of Tory MPs calling for Johnson's return. Yes, that's exactly what has been happening this past week. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So we learned last month that this shadowy group of alleged Tory donors trying to bring Sunak down, with David Frost acting as their frontman, would drip bad stories in an attempt to force the Tories to replace their leader before the election. So assuming Sunak doesn't want to wait too long to call the election, it doesn't seem feasible to me. So the tactics can only work to make the electoral damage worse for the Conservatives. But it is possible that the people behind this group do not mind, because it will help them take over the ruins of the Conservative Party afterwards. That is always assuming that these group of so-called Tory donors aren't in reality Labour donors, you know. But after their MRP poll shenanigans a few weeks ago, we knew that their next skirmish would be this week. We've got two by-elections in what some might think are safe Tory seats if you just look at recent general election results, but which are in reality going to Labour all day long. We also have some crucial economic news tomorrow. If Sunak is lucky, we will have dodged recession at the end of last year and he can breathe a huge sigh of relief. It will be absolutely madness that a government will welcome economic news that says, yes, your economy didn't grow at all, because that is better than the alternative. Because if he's not lucky, he's going to end this week with another two humiliating by-election results, the country officially in recession, completely on his watch, and possibly more suffocating poll results. This is why, by sheer coincidence, we are expecting a visit by President Zelensky on Friday. Total coincidence, of course, yes. So it came as no surprise to me to see newspaper articles calling for Boris Johnson's return. Not as leader, of course. Only Johnson's most drunk cultists are calling for that in the foreseeable future. It's not realistic. No, to return to help the Conservative campaign. And one who has openly called upon Rishi Sunak to persuade Johnson to get on the campaign wagon this week is Kwasi Kwarteng, a man whose own political judgment is, if anything, even worse than Sunak's. He's famous, of course, for his disastrous mini-budget, which has gone down in history as the kamikaze budget and led to Liz Truss becoming the shortest-serving Prime Minister in British history. But his own political career is not just defined by the most spectacular political misstep in living memory. He was also one of those prominently pushing Boris Johnson to nobble the Standards Committee in 2021 in order to save Owen Paterson's bacon. It led to Johnson getting his MPs to disband the entire committee rather than see his mate being suspended. Within about 2 days, the Tories had to come back to Parliament with their tails between their legs, being forced to vote to put it back again after a huge public backlash against an incredibly blatant abuse of power. Kwarteng himself was forced to apologise to the chair of the committee for his role in the whole sordid affair. Boris Johnson's reputation took a huge hit, and soon after Partygate blew up in the news. I said at the time, because the reports on Partygate were so long after the event, it was very obvious someone was holding on to the evidence until Johnson was vulnerable. The Owen Paterson scandal weakened Johnson, and then Partygate knocked him on his arse. So Kwasi Kwarteng was arguably instrumental in a major, albeit unwitting way, in causing Johnson's downfall. And given that Kwarteng did not want Johnson to fall, this makes him someone you do not turn to for political advice. He's a proper reverse Midas. However, there are many in his party who look over his past political incompetence, maybe even blame others for it, and agree that Johnson is their only chance of victory, as if they have any chance at all. Boris Johnson is that most fortunate of political leaders, a martyr. He won 2 mayoral contests and a general election. He did it by sticking to sound strategies against an opposition who did not adapt to their own campaign against him. But most people don't analyse campaigns, they just see the results. And the results were that Johnson won 3-0. Sunak, on the other hand, is seen as the upstart who hadn't even completed his apprenticeship, yet thought he could supplant the master. Essentially, the calls within the Conservative Party for Johnson to help with their campaign is huge. It's a no-win situation for Sunak. Absolute lose-lose-lose situation. On the one hand, Boris Johnson is no longer the electoral asset he once was. Partygate, on top of the other scandals, has effectively destroyed his reputation amongst whole swathes of target voters. It may well be fair to say he probably has more cachet with some voters than Sunak, but it does not seem credible to suppose that Boris Johnson could significantly improve Conservative fortunes by simply getting on their campaign bandwagon. I mean, how would that even work? Even if you suppose there were millions of voters who would return to the Conservatives if Johnson asked them to, why would they? They're not being asked to vote for a Johnson government, but a Sunak government. And therein lies another flaw with this brain fart. If Johnson genuinely believed he could make a positive difference to the campaign, and he's arrogant enough to, why would he want to? Someone as vain as Johnson will delight in a devastating Tory loss after his political assassination, just as much as he delighted in his own win 4 years ago, maybe more so. Why would Johnson give up his martyrdom? Why would he want to help out his own assassin? So when the Telegraph reported at the weekend that if Sunak wants Johnson's help, he has to give him a call, Boris Johnson was effectively telling the wider party, whose support he still wants, that he is open to campaigning for them. But he needs to be invited. He thinks he's probably safe enough from Sunak doing so, as Johnson is not actually of any practical use to him. But let us say Sunak did talk to him, rang him up, says, "Oh, Boris, you're the best. Would you like to come and help campaign with us?" Johnson can also always claim that Sunak seemed to not want him being too involved, just a token involvement, wasn't really serious. Or Johnson could decide to get involved, to go on the campaign trail. Because it still wouldn't match if the Tories lose. He gets to say, well, of course I can't work my magic as just a rodeo clown. He can say that what helped him win the previous elections was the public were voting for him to take charge. It's a win-win-win situation for Boris Johnson, no matter what happens, no matter what he does, no matter what Sunak does. That's the beauty of political martyrdom. But these articles promoting the ridiculous notion of Johnson helping the Conservative campaign as some sort of court conjurer, ahead of what promises to be another very bruising week for Sunak, has to be for some purpose, some strategic purpose. It's as if every time Sunak's failure as a leader becomes apparent, his opponents want to not just point out that Sunak is failing. They want to parade Boris Johnson like he's a prize on the 80s game show Bullseye. Here's what you could have won. And this is Boris Johnson's great prize now, if he recognises it. As long as he never tries to return to frontline politics, his ego can enjoy immortality. When Sunak loses the election this year, Johnson is the one who says, I would have won it. I would have won it. And in the minds of many in his party, that's the case. His ego can feed on this forever. But it's not just about Johnson. Sunak's opponents will use it to paint everyone who supported him as the architects of the election loss. It feeds a narrative, even if it doesn't succeed in bringing Sunak down ahead of the election, that whomever takes over the leadership of the party in opposition needs to be one of those who sounded the warning bells about Sunak and tried to keep Johnson in place. Because after all, why would you replace a losing leader with those who agreed with the strategy of that losing leader? You wouldn't, would you? It would make absolutely no sense. So there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.